Hurricane Larry was a strong and long-lived Cape Verde hurricane that became the first hurricane to make landfall in Newfoundland since Igor in 2010. It was the 12th named storm, the 5th hurricane, and the 3rd major hurricane of the 2021 hurricane season. It originated off a tropical wave that emerged off Africa and organized into a tropical depression on August 31st. It would then intensify to a Category 3 hurricane, peaking with winds of 125 miles per hour. Larry would then fluctuate in intensity before weakening to Category 1 status as it passed by Bermuda and then made landfall in Newfoundland. Larry would then dissipate on September 13th as a post-tropical cyclone over the Atlantic Ocean.
But how in-depth were these videos? How informative were they? Well, in this video, we are going to go back in time from when Larry was just a tropical depression until it intensified to a Category 3 hurricane, until it made landfall in Newfoundland, making it the first hurricane to do so since 2010. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this trip down memory lane.
My first video covering Hurricane Larry, as well as my first video ever on this YouTube channel, was posted on August 31st, 2021. At the moment, the NHC, or the National Hurricane Center, had just designated this a tropical depression near the Cape Verde Islands.
Good afternoon. We are currently looking at Tropical Depression 12, which is developed off the coast of Africa. It is currently moving west-northwest at 16 miles per hour with sustained winds of 35 miles per hour and a pressure of 1,006 millibars. The storm is expected to strengthen into a tropical storm in the next 12 hours and a hurricane in the next 48 hours. The models after that seem to be a bit mixed, as some expect it to be a major hurricane while others keep it in the Category 1 to Category 2 range.
However, Tropical Depression 12 continued to develop and organize at a very rapid pace, and soon it was designated Tropical Storm Larry.
Tropical Storm Larry is quickly intensifying in the eastern Atlantic near the Canary Islands. As you can see right now, it looks like an eye is starting to develop, and that convection is still bubbling out in the western side of it, and it appears that maybe some circulation is getting around the eye. Current storm information: maximum sustained winds are 55 knots or 65 miles per hour. Minimum central pressure is 994 millibars. And if the tropical storm force winds extend out 60 miles from the center, it is currently 12.4 degrees north and 28.4 degrees west. This is the latest models for the tracks. All the models are now in agreement that it will take a shift more to the northwest after 48 hours. Intensity forecasts are now in. There is one model that intends it'll go up to a Category 5. We are not ruling that out, but there's a very low chance of that happening at this time.
By that point in time, all the models agreed that this thing was going to strengthen to at least a Category 1 hurricane. But the question was, at the time, and even throughout the whole time, how strong was it going to get?
That was honestly the big question that I was looking at. I mean, if you look back then, you really don't know how this is going to intensify. You don't know how quickly it's going to intensify. I knew for sure it was going to be a hurricane, but the question was when, and the question was when was it going to keep intensifying? How quickly was it going to do it? There were so many questions at that point. No one really knew the answer.
Then, on the early morning of September 2nd, Larry was designated a Category 1 hurricane by the National Hurricane Center.
Hurricane Larry is still strengthening at this point. It is still strengthening rather quickly. As you can see, its core is starting to get slightly more organized and slightly more developed. The hurricane has really expanded its size in the last 12 hours.
Now, Larry had completed its first step on its journey by becoming a hurricane. The question was how strong it was going to get. We never had a really close idea because the models were so diverse, and the National Hurricane Center had it going out and having it become a major hurricane within 5 days. Little did we know that this thing was expected to become a major hurricane much sooner than that.
At that point, it was just, even though it was now a hurricane, it was just a guessing game. So, no one knew for sure,
how strong it was going to get. The NHC at that point did have it becoming a major hurricane 5 days out, but the models were so diverse at that point. They were so diverse. We were seeing a couple of models going up to Category 5 strength, so all the options for this hurricane were really on the table, but it essentially caught us off guard. After taking a day or so to organize further, Larry then became a Category 2 hurricane with its eye clearing out.
Hurricane Larry is continuing to intensify, as you can see. This convection is really starting to ramp up a little bit right here, and an eye is starting to develop on the satellite imagery right here. I'm actually going to go to this right here, show you what I'm talking about. The eye is starting to clear in right there on satellite imagery. We're going to go back to this image right here. If you know what I'm talking about. So this is the latest advisory according to the National Hurricane Center. It is now a Category 2 hurricane with winds of 100 miles an hour and a pressure of 978 millibars. It is moving west-northwest at 16 miles per hour, and its current location is 15.0 degrees north and 42.0 degrees west, and is expected to continue its trend to the west-northwest for the next few days before shifting more to the northwest, and it is expected to become a major hurricane by this point, either tomorrow or on Sunday.
At the point where Hurricane Larry was really clearing its eye out, yeah, at that point we knew that this thing was intensifying at a very fast pace. The question was, we weren't sure how quickly it was going to intensify into a major hurricane or not, because the NHC by that point had this going into major hurricane status in the next day or so, and yeah, it ended up being much quicker than that. Then, 6 hours later, at 11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on September 5th, Larry became a major hurricane with winds of 115 miles per hour.
Breaking news! Larry is now a major hurricane. This is the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane Larry is once again a major hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 115 miles per hour, making it a Category 3 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale. It's moving west-northwest at 16 miles per hour. Its current location
after that
is 15.5 degrees north, 43.3 degrees west, and its minimum central pressure is 965 millibars.
At that point,
the intensity tracks have updated, and now a couple of them go up to Category 5 strength. One of them goes briefly, the other has it going up to potentially 150 knots or 175 miles per hour.
The way this hurricane jumped categories in 6 hours at that point really made me question, how much stronger is this going to get? Is this rate of intensity going to continue? Is this going to eventually become a Category 4 or, God forbid, a Category 5? And that was really the question I was looking at for the next 12 hours at that point. As this thing continued to intensify, it started intensifying at a slower pace than it had at that point, and eventually it would not bottom out, but it would eventually just reach the cap intensity it would get to. Then Larry reached its maximum strength. At winds of 125 miles per hour, it was now a high-end Category 3 hurricane. At that point, Larry had also continually cleared its eye out, and the eye revealed itself in its true form, much larger than I really anticipated at that point.
Hurricane Larry has continued to strengthen as we speak, but before we get into the information, I want to show you a couple of things. First off, the satellite imagery right here. It looks like an eye is just, like, huge eye is right there and everything. It looks like that stadium effect that we usually see with strong hurricanes. Second thing is that I want to go back a few, about 120 frames to show you the evolution of this eye. And there it goes. And then next thing you know, it just starts clearing out and it just reveals itself just like that, and it starts contracting. I'll show it again. There it is, it just clears out. It turns to a huge eye, then it starts contracting. that is indicative of a strengthening hurricane. This is the latest on Larry. It currently has maximum sustained winds of 125 miles per hour, pressure of 958 millibars, which is down 7 millibars since the last advisory at 5 a.m. 4 a.m. Central Time. Yeah, center of location is 16.8 degrees north, 45.8 degrees west, moving west-northwest at 15 miles per hour. Hurricane force winds now extend 45 miles from the center. Tropical storm force winds extend 160 miles from the center. But if there's an eye that large, either the eye is going to start contracting it and it's going to strengthen, or it is going to, the wind field is just going to go in all directions. We'll have to wait and see. Here is the forecast models right here. Majority of the models surprisingly keep it at a Category 3 hurricane. However, the rest of them either have it go up to low-end Category 4, or some have it going all the way up to Category 5. It's a bit outlandish, but it's more of a wait and see right there. It's either way, it's still going to be it's a major hurricane no matter what.
When Larry revealed its eye at that point, I was just in a state of awe because I don't see eyes in hurricanes that large and that impressive. I don't see that very often. And seeing that in Hurricane Larry, it genuinely surprised me. And in the next update, I just went ahead and talked about it for some of the time. Larry then fluctuated in intensity between 120 and 125 miles per hour during the advisories. At that point in time, it was still fluctuating, and the core started showing signs of weakness, and then Larry would recover itself. But then, after a short time, Larry's core would start to collapse.
Hurricane Larry continues to move to the west-northwest at 14 miles per hour at this point. Its maximum sustained winds are still at 125 miles per hour. Its current location is 17.4 degrees north, 47.1 degrees west. It is still expected to become a major hurricane at this point. Finally, some good news on Hurricane Larry. First of all, as you can see on the satellite, the eye looks a lot more ragged than it did at the last update, and I'm here to tell you why that is. Well, not exactly why, but what's going on. One thing a thing of good news is that Hurricane Larry is weakening. Finally, this is a good first piece of good news we have. The thing is, though, it's weakened slightly down to 120 miles per hour, down from 125, but any kind of weakening is good news. Hurricane Larry has re-strengthened to 125 mile per hour Category 3 hurricane. The eye has shrunk considerably since the last advisory. At 4 a.m. Central, 5 a.m. Eastern Time, the advisory had Hurricane Larry at 120 miles per hour with wind gusts up to 140 with a pressure of 958 millibars. Currently, the hurricane is now at backed up to 125 miles per hour with a pressure of 955 millibars, which is down 3 since the last advisory. This is the cone. Bermuda is out of the cone right now, but it is expected to clip the area as potentially a Category 2 hurricane, so folks there need to watch out for that. Hurricane Larry is moving to the northwest now at 13 miles per hour. We have the latest information from the National Hurricane Center. It is moving northwest 13 miles per hour. No change in the sustained winds at 125 miles per hour, even though the satellite imagery right here shows the eye contracting, which is probably meaning that the eye probably just went under some cloud cover. It's still probably very large, but it's just looking a little more ragged now. We don't know what's going on with it. All we have is satellite. We don't have any reconnaissance to confirm or deny anything. I just wanted to make a quick update on Hurricane Larry. The advisory is not out or anything, but I'm looking at the satellite imagery right now, It appears that the core of the hurricane is starting to destabilize. It looks like really ragged. It looks like it's starting to collapse on itself. Also, like, basically the hurricane does not look nearly as healthy as it did even at the last advisory. Like, as you can see, the banding is just getting pretty bad. Like, this right here, the core looks like it's just collapsing at this point, and even the outer edges of the hurricane look like it's just an absolute mess on the outside. It's still an organized storm, but it doesn't look nearly as healthy as it did. The advisory is not out yet, doesn't come out for a few more hours, but I don't think this is going to be a 125 mile per hour hurricane at this point. Hurricane Larry's latest advisory has just come in. As you can see, at the 11 p.m. Eastern Time advisory, they are still going with 125 miles per hour, moving west-northwest at 12 miles per hour. Excuse me, northwest at 12 miles per hour. The current location is 21 degrees north, 51.4 degrees west. Hurricane Larry continues to move to the northwest. At this time, it remains a very large hurricane. That eye has made a bit of a recovery. It's a really large eye, which indicates a very large wind field. So this is the public advisory. Winds remain at 125 miles per hour. They've been fluctuating down to 120, then back to 125, and so on and so forth. It's moving northwest at 10 miles per hour. Its pressure has went up slightly to 956 millibars, and Larry remains a large hurricane. Hurricane force winds extend out 70 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds 185 miles from the center. If it was 85 miles from the center, that would have been unsustainable. So this is the intensity forecast. The majority, including the NHC, keep it at a Category 3. A few go up to Cat 4. I don't think it's going to happen at this point. And after that, it's going to start weakening as it heads further north, as it heads more towards Labrador, as it heads towards more like Newfoundland. Hurricane Larry is continuing to slow down its pace, moving northwest at 10 miles per hour. Here's the latest information on it. It is still a 125 mile per hour hurricane. Its current location is 23.1 degrees north, 54.4 degrees west. To support that, support it being a tropical system, that is. So we're going back to this just to show you this one more time. Then we're going to go to the public advisory, show it right here. It's very gradual weakening is forecast over the next several days. Well, it looks like Hurricane Larry's structure just, I don't know how to describe it. I'm gonna go back to 120 frames just to show you. Like, Hurricane Larry's structure is basically, the outer structure just collapsed at this point. It's not nearly as healthy as of a hurricane as it once was, and I'm going to show you what that the effect is of this is caused. It actually, Hurricane Larry is weakening right now. It currently has maximum sustained winds near 115 miles per hour. With higher gusts, gradual weakening is forecast during the next several days. There's a pressure of 967 millibars. That's up from 956 last video. This is once again the structure just collapsing at this point. The outer structure, the inner core is still relatively intact, but it's not nearly as healthy as it once was. Here's the intensity models. Some of them have it going up to Category 4, but I'm discontinuing that. Some of it have it re-strengthening. That's likely not going to happen. It's just going to go downhill from here. And here is the next latest hottest track right here. No change for the next 48 hours. It will become a post-tropical cyclone as an equivalent of a Category 1 hurricane in the northern Atlantic. So we're back to the original satellite. A tropical storm watch has been issued for the people of Bermuda. That's the newest information we have out as well. They're going to get tropical storm force winds, nothing else. This is still a considerably large hurricane, just to remind everyone. Hurricane force winds are still 70 miles from the center. Tropical storm force winds still 185 miles from the center.
At this point, after watching all the fluctuations, watching the core go through a near-miss experience, it seemed that this hurricane was quite a beast at this point. Its wind field expanded considerably. Hurricane force winds were 70 miles from the center, as you saw in that last advisory in the clip before this segment right here. But then Larry's structure started to collapse on itself, and I was there to witness all of it. I was there to watch all of it, and it was quite a shocking thing to take a look at, because a beast of that size, that generally doesn't really happen. Hurricane Larry did undergo some eyewall replacement cycles, but this was just, in my opinion, it was just a combination of a core collapse and an eyewall replacement cycle going wrong. That's what it looked like on satellite. But yeah, I was there to see that, and it was quite mesmerizing. It was finally some good news that we were seeing, because that meant the storm was going to only weakening at that point, and it felt pretty good to watch. While this was good news to see, it was still a large hurricane at that point in time, and the people of Bermuda were about to get affected.
Hurricane Larry is still a Category 3 hurricane at this time. We had the latest advisory as of 11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Winds are still near 115 miles per hour, as said in this advisory right here, with stronger gusts. Slow weakening is forecast in the next several days. It's still a large hurricane with hurricane force winds 70 miles out from the center. Tropical storm force 185, no change there. No change in the pressure, which is 967 millibars. What it has changed is the cone. The cone, I'm not too concerned-ish out here, but I'm looking more out long-term after it becomes a Category 2, maybe Cat 1 hurricane, then a post-tropical cyclone, because there are models that indicate it might hit Canada and then just cruise out into the sunset near Greenland, just as a post-tropical cyclone with hurricane and then tropical storm force strength, if it even gets up that far north. Yeah, so yeah, this is the latest model track right here. Bermuda is going to get tropical storm force winds. A tropical storm watch is up. That's why the NHC is now putting up intermediate advisories every 3 hours. We're not reporting on it unless there's a major change that occurs. For example, if it's not a major hurricane anymore, if it starts weakening considerably.
At that particular point in time, I was just focused on how this was going to impact Bermuda at this point. I mean, it was good news that the outer structure of this hurricane collapsed when it did, but at that point, I was just worried about the people of Bermuda at that point, because I wasn't sure how many impacts there were going to be at that point. I mean, this was a very large hurricane. It had a hurricane force winds out 70 miles from the center, tropical storm force 180. So, yeah, it was just at this point, I was less concerned about the structure of it collapsing than I was about how it was going to impact Bermuda. So that's where I really focused on at that point. I also was starting to see some models that this potentially could make landfall in Canada, particularly in Newfoundland near St. John's. So I was continuing to see that I was looking into that, but at that moment in time, I was focused on this thing affecting Bermuda, and I was also focused on this structure just collapsing at that point. Then, on Wednesday, September 8th, at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Larry weakened below major hurricane status. Further good news.
Hurricane Larry is no longer a major hurricane. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The newest advisory just came out. It is no longer a major hurricane. It now has maximum sustained winds of 110 miles per hour, moving northwest at 13 miles per hour. Its current location is 28.3 degrees north, 58.9 degrees west. Here's the back to the satellite right here. before we get to the rest of the models, we need to talk about the structure of this hurricane. This since this time yesterday has just basically the structure is that we had yesterday is non-existent, pretty much. The hurricane we have now is just, it looks just awful on satellite and everything.
Just awful. That's the only way I could really describe it. This structure of Hurricane Larry had just collapsed at that point. It looked non-existent from where it was 24 hours beforehand. And that was good news for the people of Bermuda. However, a tropical storm warning was up at that point, and at that point, I just continued the uploads, continued posting the videos, keeping people informed. There were some more models coming in of a potential landfall in Canada. I continued to keep a closer eye on it as the cone continued to shift more towards Newfoundland for the landfall.
Hurricane Larry is continuing to weaken as it approaches Bermuda, with when it'll impact the island with tropical storm force winds. This is the latest advisory as of 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Maximum sustained winds are now down to 105 miles per hour, moving northwest at 15 miles per hour, which is it's speeding up right as we speak. And its current location is 28.9 degrees north, 59.8 degrees west.
As Larry weakened to a Category 1 hurricane now, Bermuda is starting to see the first impacts of the hurricane and its huge reach of tropical storm force wind.
Hurricane Larry is now bringing tropical storm force conditions to Bermuda. So this is the latest advisory out. It is now a Category 1 hurricane with winds at 90 miles per hour. It is moving north-northwest at 17 miles per hour, so it's starting to make that another one of those turns where it's going to start heading to the northeast pretty soon. Its current location is 32.9 degrees north, 62 degrees west, and this is it right here. It's going to start turning east very soon. This is the latest intensity forecast. I'm disregarding every model right here that has it strengthening again. Hurricane Larry is now bringing tropical storm force conditions to Bermuda. So this is the latest advisory out. It is now a Category 1 hurricane with winds at 90 miles per hour. It is moving north-northwest at 17 miles per hour, so it's starting to make that another one of those turns where it's going to start heading to the northeast pretty soon. Its current location is 32.9 degrees north, 62 degrees west, and this is it right here. It's going to start turning east very soon. This is the latest intensity forecast. I'm disregarding every model right here that has it strengthening again.
Then, as Larry continued to very quickly approach Newfoundland, I decided to go live for the first time ever on YouTube.
Moving through a less favorable environment for strengthening. This is the forecast track where it's going. After it's done hitting Bermuda, a lot of models now have it making landfall on just the eastern island right here on Canada. There is a hurricane watch in effect right now, right here, and we will be watching the situation closely to see if it does make landfall. And then after that, it's going to head up to Greenland. There are some models that are saying it's going to move ashore, while others have it skidding just right by. So that's too far out for us to know, so we'll wait and see. So as of right now, you can see it's trying to develop an eye. We're going to go back 120 frames to really give you an idea what's going on. Oh, it's taking a minute. There you go. So yeah, it's just tried to form an eye, but it didn't quite outwork. So yeah, the eye tried to form. It ends up not going so well. So yeah, that's the kind of thing we expect with hurricanes like this. So that's the latest on Hurricane Larry. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more updates.
However, now a hurricane watch was in effect for parts of Newfoundland, including St. John's, Canada. At that point, when the hurricane watch was issued, I was a bit stunned about it. I was a bit shocked that this thing was going to be a hurricane that far north, honestly. And I know hurricanes, like tropical cyclones, generally don't make landfall in that part of the world at this point. I mean, even when they do, they don't necessarily make landfall as hurricanes. They make landfall as either post-tropical or extratropical cyclones. But this thing, it was possible for it to become and stay a hurricane at that point. It was still possible at that point. I was a little skeptical about it, but it's no matter what, there was still a hurricane watch out. There was still something that I needed to basically just watch for, something I needed to cover. And basically, at that point, the people of St. John's, the people of Newfoundland, at that point, I'm sure they started preparing for this hurricane. If this hurricane made landfall, I actually researched this, and at the time I said if this hurricane made landfall, it would be the first since Hurricane Igor in 2010, which that would make it pretty much the first hurricane in 11 years to make landfall in Canada. That's in itself is impressive for the storm, but it's also really bad for the people that were affected. Thankfully, at this point, it was just a Category 1 hurricane and not a Category 3. So, yeah, the last tropical or post-tropical cyclone to impact parts of Canada was actually the extratropical or post-tropical cyclone Dorian, which had winds at the time of 100 miles per hour after it had devastated the Bahamas, after it paralleled the United States coast, made landfall at Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. It then became a Cat 2 hurricane, then it eventually transitioned to a post-tropical cyclone. So I was keeping a big eye on that. I was, again, still skeptical, but it was something worth watching for a little while. Then hurricane warnings went up for parts of Newfoundland. Tropical storm warnings went up for parts of Newfoundland, but further to the west. At that point, things were starting to go downhill as Larry was rapidly approaching from Bermuda to Newfoundland, Canada. Also, tropical storm force winds and the outer bands were already starting to reach Nova Scotia as well. So, at that point in time, it was time to consider other options of coverage. It was at that point I really considered going live to cover this thing, this hurricane making landfall live on YouTube at that point. It was at that point I was starting to consider that. I was weighing my options on that, and I was thinking about it. And at that point in time, as the hurricane got closer and closer, I knew I had to make a decision. So, yeah, I made a decision right there. Hurricane Larry is moving at a very, very fast pace towards Canada, towards Newfoundland. New advisory is in. It has maximum sustained winds of 80 miles per hour now. It is moving north-northeast at 29 miles per hour, according to this latest advisory. Its current location is 41.8 degrees north, 59.5 degrees west. There are hurricane warnings for the southeastern part of Newfoundland, including St. John, and there are tropical storm force warnings further to the west of the island. This is the latest key messages from Hurricane Larry. 1. Larry is forecast to move over portions of southeastern Newfoundland tonight as it undergoes transition to a hurricane-force post-tropical cyclone. That transition is already starting. As you can see that nor'easter effect right here has blended into the hurricane core right here, and it's getting more or less of a rotation than the center of circulation is. So we'll be watching that. So the transition has already started as it moves further north towards Canada. Hurricane conditions and a dangerous storm surge as well as heavy rainfall are expected for portions of southeastern Newfoundland where a hurricane warning is in effect. 2. Large swells generated from Larry will continue to affect the Bahamas, Bermuda, and the east coast of the U.S. and Atlantic Canada through Saturday night. These swells will cause life-threatening surf and rip current conditions, and beachgoers and other interests along the East Coast are urged to follow the guidance of lifeguards and local officials. So if you're in St. John, Newfoundland, and you're ordered to evacuate, leave. If you're ordered to shelter in place, get all of your supplies. You don't have much time left. This hurricane is going to make landfall in the next 12 to 18 hours. Hurricane Larry is fast approaching Newfoundland as of right now. The latest advisory is out. It is still an 80-mile-per-hour hurricane. It is now moving north-northeast at 35 miles per hour. Its current location is 43.5 degrees north, 58.2 degrees west. By tomorrow morning, this hurricane will already have passed Newfoundland. It's expected to make landfall sometime either in the late night or in the early hours, so around maybe 10, 11, 12, 1 to 2 o'clock. Then it's going to move ashore, and by 5 o'clock it's going to be offshore. Then it's going to continue towards Greenland. By that point, it'll be a post-tropical cyclone, and then it'll dissipate at sometime during the weekend. This is the intensity forecast.
I will be live streaming in 2 hours at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central Time. So be sure to look into that. We will be streaming for about a couple of hours, just in time for the 11 p.m. Eastern Time advisory, and we will be watching the situation develop as it does. So stay tuned.
It was at that point I decided to go live on YouTube, because at that point Larry was about to make landfall on Canada for the first time in 11 years, and since Canada, this part of the world generally doesn't get hurricanes very often, it's generally less prepared than it normally was. So those factors alone allowed me to make the decision to go live for 2 hours as I covered its landfall, as I covered the core coming on shore Newfoundland, and as I informed the viewers who were watching what was going on. Then, at 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, I went live, covering Hurricane Larry as it made landfall. Hello everybody, welcome to the stream tonight. This is Pat's Path Predictor. I'm your host Pat, or you can call me Patrick. I don't care which. So anyway, tonight's main focus will be on Hurricane Larry, which is about to make landfall on Newfoundland as a Category 1 hurricane. We'll discuss all of that. We will also discuss the 2 new tropical disturbances that are in the Atlantic Basin. We will also be doing that, and we will take any questions from any of our viewers if they have any. But before we begin, I just want to say thank you so much for 25 subscribers. It's honestly a very humbling. I really appreciate it. And so yeah, I won't let you guys down. So anyway, tonight's main feature tonight is Hurricane Larry, which I have been tracking the last 10 days. This is latest advisory was Advisory 41. So just a quick recap: Hurricane Larry emerged as a huge tropical wave off of Africa. It developed into a major hurricane. It then turned towards Bermuda. It hit Bermuda with tropical storm force winds as a Cat 1 hurricane. Then it shifted to the northeast, and now it is moving very, very rapidly towards Newfoundland. St. John is right here. I would expect hurricane force winds to arrive very soon if they haven't already. So yeah, this is that wind. This once again, for those of you who are just tuning in, this is that wind. This is the wind field at this point. This is basically engulfing the majority of Newfoundland at this point. It's coming ashore. This is from 2.5 hours ago, but at the same time, it's still a very large radius. Earlier today, Nova Scotia got some impacts from got some outer bands of Hurricane Larry as it was moving towards Newfoundland. Nova Scotia is right here for non-Canadian viewers, or for those who are in the U.S. Nova Scotia is right here. This is Newfoundland. This is Greenland right here. This is Quebec. But anyway, yeah, Nova Scotia got some outer bands of the hurricane as it was moving very quickly, and now it's about to come on shore to Newfoundland. If it holds its tropical characteristics, it'll be the first hurricane since Igor to make landfall in 2010. So keep that in mind, everybody. The thing I always was asking myself, I was also talking about this during the stream, was if this hurricane was still a hurricane or if it was going to be designated as a post-tropical cyclone. That was the main question I had for that first hour of coverage. I didn't downplay the hurricane landfall at all. It was just the question I had at that point. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a hurricane. It didn't look like any hurricane I had seen before, but I was mostly curious about that, while at the same time reporting on what was going on in Newfoundland. At that point, the core was still about to come on shore. It was already coming on shore, and then the 10 p.m. Central, 11 p.m. Eastern advisory came out, and still was a hurricane at that point. So that was a bit shocking, which basically meant this thing was going to make history, and I was going to be live streaming that history. So yeah, it was honestly a little bit of it was both exciting and it was both just a little worrying, because I knew there were people in St. John's. There were people in Canada in that area that don't really experience hurricanes all that often. So yeah, I was basically telling people to just hunker down and just get into an interior room, because the winds were 80 miles per hour. This isn't a Category 3 hurricane at that point where it's just ripping off roofs and everything, but it still was going to cause quite a bit of damage. So I was doing my best to tell people, instruct them what they should do. And at that point, it just continued to move ashore, and eventually it made landfall.
You'll see it one more time. There it is. It moved up over. Now it's approaching Newfoundland. It's very close to shore. It's about to make landfall. The latest advisory just came out. The latest advisory just came out. We're gonna take a quick look at this. Take a quick peek at this. National Hurricane Center. That's the key messages from earlier. We're going to analyze this. It is still a hurricane. It's still a hurricane. It's moving on shore. Its center location is now, its maximum sustained winds are now still 80 miles per hour. But look at this. It is moving north-northeast at 47 miles per hour. That is a huge jump from just 3 hours ago. That really shows you that this storm is really cranking up in speed. This thing's going to probably make landfall like within the next 30 minutes at this point. The center location is 46.8 degrees north, 54.5 degrees west. Bit of a surprise considering that this hurricane is just, this far north, because, and I get it's been like that for several days. Which is understandable. So there it is, advisory 42. Pressure still at 958 millibars. Huh. Let's see. All right, so let's take a quick look. I'm taking a quick look at this. Warnings. So yeah, hurricane warning still in effect. No change in that at all. So yeah, that's the latest on Hurricane Larry. That's its 42nd advisory. It's still a hurricane, but moving much faster than anticipated, at least for me. I found NHC had this making landfall. I hope you guys prepared everything adequately. because this is the strongest part. Once this passes over you, you're not in the woods, but it only gets better from here. Hold on, let me pause. I'm gonna go back to right here. Literally the entire core, pretty much the whole core of this system is on the area where the hurricane warning was issued. That's why the NHC issued it for right here. That's why it went up for right here. This area of 80 plus mile per hour gusts right here, that's why the warning was issued. There's hurricane force winds in this whole core right here. Don't worry, it's only going to last a little longer. Everything will be okay once this is passed. I'm going to refresh this real quickly. Alright, St. John's is in the northeastern part of it. They're just in the beginning of it. It's still moving very quickly, so it's gonna be a fast moving. So basically, if you're in the southern part of this area right here in the hurricane warned area, you're almost out of it. You're not anywhere near the clear yet. You're just pretty close to getting on the back end of it. But once this whole core is done, it's done. Once it moves offshore, you're still going to get tropical storm force winds for a few hours. But basically, because there's dry air on the south part of it, there's going to be no precipitation or anything like that. Maybe some cloud cover, but that's it. So I think Larry made landfall on Nova Scotia. No, not Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. Nova Scotia is over here. This is Newfoundland. Sorry, I get those two mixed up from time to time. But anyway, if that's the case, this is the first hurricane to make landfall since Hurricane Igor in 2010.
Larry did in fact make landfall at that time. The National Hurricane Center announced at 11:50 Eastern Daylight Time, Larry made landfall in Newfoundland, making it the first hurricane to make landfall since Igor in 2010. This had winds of 80 miles per hour, and its entire core was literally in the hurricane-warned area. That is, in my opinion, just impressive at its very own at that point. But after a couple of hours, the core of Larry would move off of Newfoundland, and soon it would be designated a post-tropical cyclone. The next morning, the last update on post-tropical cyclone Larry was issued by the channel, and at that point, the saga of
post-tropical cyclone
was
Larry
over.
is now out in the northern Atlantic Ocean right now. This is the 11 a.m. Eastern Time advisory. It is moving north-northeast at 48 miles per hour. It is expected to dissipate by later today. Newfoundland received a landfall from then Hurricane Larry, the first hurricane to make landfall since Igor in 2010. We covered that live. So anyway, this will be my last update on post-tropical cyclone Larry. There will be no more updates on this after this. The saga since August 31st is over.
Larry would then dissipate the next day on September 13th, ending the Cape Verde Hurricane that went from a tropical depression, rapidly intensified to a Category 3 hurricane, and then impacted Bermuda and made landfall in Canada, making it the first hurricane since Igor in 2010. This whole saga, as I would put it, it was really interesting to cover, because this was the first hurricane I ever covered on my YouTube channel, and it was also the first hurricane to make landfall in Canada in 11 years. So, yeah, overall Larry ended up just, you know, like the coverage that I put out, like I believe was rather informative. I believe when I went, it was the right thing to do when I went live. And yeah, that's basically the history of Hurricane Larry. So, yeah, to conclude my documentary, this is what I will say. Just because a hurricane makes landfall now in Newfoundland, just because a hurricane makes landfall now and won't do so for a while, if you're watching this 10 years out in the future, just because Hurricane Larry made landfall in 2021, and there hasn't been another hurricane since then, doesn't mean there is never the possibility. Igor hit in 2010. Larry hit in 2021. It can happen at any time. That's the lesson all I can really put at that point. So, yeah, that concludes my documentary. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to hit the like button on it if you really enjoyed it. Be sure to consider subscribing to the channel for more documentaries like this, and turn on notifications for more updates.